The morning Winston brought home a wild bobcat, I thought I was going crazy. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee when I saw our old cat walking across the yard with what looked like a small wild cat with spots right next to him. They weren't running or hiding, just walking side by side like they were old pals. "Henry," I called out to my housemate, my voice trembling, "you've got to come see this right now." Let me explain how we got here. Henry and I had been living together in this quiet house near the forest for many years. We were two retired guys who had become as close as brothers. Our days were simple and calm, working in our small garden, having coffee on the porch in the morning, and chatting about whatever came to mind. Winston, our gentle old cat, was the only other one living with us. He wasn't much of a hunter, but he loved wandering around the yard every day, and he'd always come back with little sticky plants caught in his fur. But that particular morning was going to turn our simple, predictable life completely upside down. The sun had just broken through the thin clouds, making the wet grass shine with tiny water drops, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with Henry, drinking our coffee, when I saw Winston outside the window. He was walking across the yard with his tail standing up tall and proud. But something felt different. He wasn't by himself. At first, I thought he'd caught a rabbit. There was something about the way the small animal was moving next to him. But when they got closer, I realized this wasn't something he'd hunted. The animal was walking right beside him, keeping the same speed like a friend would. Then I saw the pointed ears, the spotted coat, the short tail. My coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. "Henry," I said softly, "you're not going to believe what I'm looking at." Henry came over to the window and his eyes got really wide. "That's a bobcat, no question," he said. The young wild cat walked right up to our porch steps alongside Winston, stopping whenever Winston stopped, like they'd planned this whole thing together. The bobcat looked pretty young, maybe 4 or 5 months old, with bright golden eyes and fur covered in different shades of brown and tan. She didn't look scared at all. In fact, she looked right at us through the window and blinked slowly, her ears turning toward Winston when he made a short, demanding sound. Henry and I stood completely still, not sure if we should open the door or call someone for help. Then Winston walked straight up to the door, sat down, and looked back at her like he was introducing a visitor. I slowly opened the door just a little bit, and to my surprise, the bobcat didn't run away. She sniffed the air with her nose, her whiskers shaking slightly, then came closer, her paws silent on the wooden boards. Winston went inside like this was completely normal. The bobcat stopped right outside the doorway, looking inside like she was deciding if we were good enough for her. Henry, who was always braver than me in these kinds of situations, got down on his knees a few feet away. "Hey there, beautiful," he said gently. She didn't growl or make any scary sounds. Instead, she took another step closer. That made me decide to grab a small bowl of leftover chicken from the fridge. I put it just outside the door and backed away. She lowered her head, sniffed it carefully, then started eating like she hadn't eaten in days. We watched her quietly, letting her eat without bothering her. When she was done eating, she sat back and looked at us. There was something calm in the way she looked at us. Not the nervous watchfulness you'd expect from a wild animal. "She seems really gentle," Henry said in a voice full of wonder and confidence. I had to smile. "I think Winston just made himself a friend," I said. Over the next few hours, she stayed in our yard. She walked around a little, checking out the flower garden, looking at the old wheelbarrow, then coming back to the porch. Winston went outside with her once, and I swear they sat there together like 2 guards watching over the forest. That evening she came back to the door, and this time I left it open just a crack so she could come in if she wanted to. She waited at first, just sitting there with her tail moving back and forth, watching us with those golden eyes. But when Henry tossed a small piece of chicken onto the floor, she walked in, ate it, and stayed right there. We decided to call her Willow, mostly because her coat had every shade of brown and gold you could imagine. She wasn't really our pet, but she seemed to have decided we were safe enough to visit. Our days started following a routine. Coffee on the porch in the morning, Winston going out for his walk, Willow showing up right on time to go with him, and both of them coming back together. She started letting us get closer, even rubbing against Henry's leg one afternoon when he filled up her water bowl. We never tried to grab her or make her stay inside. She was a wild animal, and we respected that. But she kept coming back, staying a little longer each time. One really cold morning, Willow gave us quite a shock. I'd gone outside to get the mail when she came running up the driveway, not with Winston this time, but all by herself. She walked right past me into the house like she'd been invited. Henry laughed from his chair in the living room. "I think this is her territory now, and we just live here," he said, clearly amused. She walked around, smelling the furniture, peeking into corners, then settled down in front of the space heater like she'd been doing it her whole life. That's when I realized we weren't just two old guys with a house cat anymore. We had a bobcat too. Or maybe she had claimed us as hers. Her friendly personality never stopped surprising me. She didn't mind when we sat near her while she ate, and sometimes she'd even take a piece of chicken right from my hand, making sure not to bite my skin with her sharp teeth. She never acted aggressive, not even once, even though we both knew she had the power and wild nature to hurt us if she wanted to. Instead, she seemed happy to be part of our strange little family whenever she felt like it. Henry started calling her our wild daughter, and even Winston seemed fine with it, often sleeping curled up next to her in the afternoons. We started reading about bobcats to make sure we were doing right by her. We learned what they eat, how much space they need to roam, and what warning signs to look for if they're stressed. We built a small covered space at the edge of the yard, filled it with straw and made sure it was protected from the rain, just in case she wanted her own place. She used it sometimes, especially on really cold nights, though usually she'd be at our door waiting to come into the warm living room. We never locked her in or tried to put a collar on her. She came and went as she pleased, and I think that's part of why she stayed so friendly. Word got around the neighborhood that we had a bobcat coming to visit. Some neighbors thought we'd completely lost it. Others wanted to come over and see her. We said no to that. She wasn't some attraction. She was our friend, and we weren't going to risk making her feel cornered or scared. But every now and then, someone would catch sight of her lying on the porch next to Winston and shake their head in shock. "I've never seen anything like that in my life," a mail carrier said to me one day. As time went by, she grew into a beautiful, strong adult. The way she moved had the natural elegance of something made for the wild. Every movement was smooth but purposeful, her muscles rippling under her coat like wind moving through tall grass. When the sunlight hit her just right, every shade of golden brown and rust in her fur seemed to glow and shimmer like she was carrying a piece of the autumn forest with her wherever she went. Her eyes, those deep golden eyes, saw everything. You could feel her watching, not in a suspicious way, but with quiet attention, like she was taking note of every change in the yard, every sound from the trees, and even the small changes in how we talked. Still, despite her strength and obvious wildness, she never became cold or careful around us. If anything, she seemed to trust us more as time passed. She spent more time with us, sometimes choosing to rest just a few feet from our porch chairs, her tail wrapped neatly around her feet, content to watch the day pass with us. In the evenings, she'd often be waiting by the door before we even saw her, her shape a patient shadow in the fading light. When we'd look at each other, she'd make that soft, almost talking-like sound, a noise that felt like it was just for us. "You're here early tonight, girl," I'd tell her, and she'd answer with that gentle chirping sound. It was a quiet, unspoken kind of love, but it became part of our everyday life, like sunshine warming the wooden boards beneath our feet. The little habits, Henry filling her water bowl, me putting out chicken pieces, Winston sitting peacefully beside her, slowly made her part of our home without us even noticing it happening. Having her around brought a warmth that neither Henry nor I had expected, a feeling of being part of something a little bigger than just ourselves. Life felt fuller, more alive, like the air itself carried a touch of her wild energy. When late fall came, she visited even more often, like the dropping temperatures pulled her toward our warmth and company. On cool mornings, I'd sometimes find her already waiting on the porch, tiny water drops stuck to her fur, her breath making little clouds in the cold air. She'd watch me drink my coffee, blinking slowly, her tail swaying lazily against the wooden boards. There were moments when I almost thought she understood the comfort she gave us. "You know you're special, don't you?" I'd whisper to her, and she'd tilt her head like she was listening. Her presence turned those quiet mornings into something meaningful and full, filling a space I hadn't even known was empty. Winter made that connection even stronger. On nights when wind rattled the roof and snow swirled under the porch light, we'd open the door to find her there, her fur covered with white, looking more like something from a storybook than anything from our real world. She'd step inside, shake the snow off, and settle near the heater, her eyes closing in contentment, while Henry and I exchanged a quiet smile. "Another cold one tonight," Henry would say, and she'd look up at him like she knew exactly what he meant. Those nights were my favorite, when the world outside was frozen and quiet, but inside we were three friends, warm and safe together. Looking back now, it still amazes me how this all began. One regular morning, Winston came home with a new friend, and without meaning to, he brought us into a completely new part of our lives. We hadn't been searching for change. Actually, we were perfectly happy with the steady pattern of our days. But change found us anyway, walking quietly up the porch steps on silent feet, with eyes that saw more than we could ever understand. However, when spring started coming, something changed. Willow's visits became less regular. Sometimes she'd be gone for several days, then show up again like nothing had happened. "She's getting restless," Henry said one morning after she hadn't shown up for 3 days. "Maybe it's her time," I answered, though saying it felt heavy in my chest. When she did come back, there was something different about her, a wildness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She still took our food and let us pet her, but she seemed to be listening to something we couldn't hear. "I think she's found others like her," Henry said quietly one evening as we watched her walk back and forth in the yard. The big moment came on a warm morning in May. Willow showed up at our door, but she wasn't by herself. Behind her, staying at a safe distance, was another bobcat, bigger, clearly a male, with scars on his face. "Well, look at that," Henry whispered. Willow came up to us like usual, but kept looking back at her companion. She took the chicken I gave her, but ate it fast, nervously. Then she did something she'd never done before. She came to each of us and rubbed against our legs, making a loud purring sound. "She's saying goodbye," I realized, my voice breaking. Henry nodded, his eyes wet with tears. "Go on, girl," he said softly. "Go live your life." She looked at us one last time with those golden eyes, made her soft chirping noise, then turned and walked into the forest with her mate. Winston watched from the window, his tail twitching, like he understood what was happening too. That was the last time we saw Willow on a regular basis. She was proof every day that not all wildness has to be feared or pushed away. Sometimes it can be welcomed, respected, and even loved for exactly what it is: wild and beautiful. For two old men who thought our lives had already settled into their final shape, she was living proof that there's always room for one more surprise, one more connection, one more story worth remembering. She taught us patience, trust, and the kind of friendship that doesn't need to own something, just understand it. Even now, a year later, she sometimes appears at the edge of the woods. There are times when she disappears completely, and I catch myself wondering if she's gone for good. On those days, the yard feels a little emptier, the porch a little quieter. But sometimes I'll hear Winston's familiar sound at the door, and far away, those golden eyes will catch the light. And there she is again, our Willow, our unexpected gift. Did you enjoy this story? What would you have done if a wild bobcat showed up at your door with your cat? Would you have opened the door and let her in, or would you have called for help and kept your distance? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video.